Day 981 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 694,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,310 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 19 tanks, 17 APVs, 58 artillery, a jaw-dropping 8 air defense system components, and a nearly record-breaking 121 soft targets. And as for those air defense losses, one includes a destroyed old OSA air defense system that was deployed in the Kherson region. Then a lot of the remainder relates to Ukrainian strikes on a Russian S-300/400 air defense system in occupied Crimea, where satellite imagery updates has since shown the battery getting damaged or destroyed from a few nights ago. Then we'll head across to the map, and starting out in Russia today, to the Belgorod region. In fact, by the border at Zurilovka, where the Russian army was performing MLRS shelling into their own region, in their attempt to suppress this newly concerning Ukrainian incursion point. Though more specifically, it was 2 points of shelling by the Russian forces a couple of kilometers apart. One location in the southwest and the other in the northwest of the town. Then headed all the way up on the map to Moscow, where a lack of air defenses, or sufficient air defenses, has created the pressing need for drone net installations on their oil refinery, which was about 16 kilometers or about 10 miles southeast of the Kremlin. Not exactly putting on display a projection of power here. Surely some Russians are asking, how did it come to this? Then to another Russian territory embarrassment, Kursk, as Russia's 810th Marine Brigade attempted assaults on tree line positions to the very north of this front, using 3 armoured fighting vehicles, but dismounted early after taking on fire, then ran away. Russia's ground army sees a lot of infield vehicle abandonment, but you can hardly blame them when their commander sends in these small and under-equipped units to storm a position or take a village, which requires much more planning and equipment than provided. However, poorly planned offensives is somewhat part of their defensive strategy, but a very wasteful and finite strategy at that. Then taking a look at updates for Kursk Koreans, where multiple sources report approximately 3,000 North Korean soldiers have been deployed to this Russian oblast, and said to be stationed just 50 kilometers from Ukraine's border. According to Ukrainian intelligence sources, only a few hundred of these troops are trained special forces, with the majority comprising of inexperienced infantry awaiting Russian command's orders. However, Ukrainian intelligence doubts their combat capability, as most of them are inexperienced infantrymen who have never been in real combat, let alone experiencing modern warfare combat. Therefore, Russians are likely to use them as cannon fodder, and though we've seen plenty of footage and stills of North Korean soldiers in Russia, whether it be to collect their Russian camo gear or performing basic military drills, it seems that their delay to the front lines in large numbers exists due to the need for the Russian army to figure out exactly how to properly integrate the foreign untrained and low-level educated contingent of these troops into the Russian military structures. Most likely, it's probably all about ensuring that the Russian army themselves can figure out how to successfully command these new recruits into infantry assaults, and, put very simply, ensuring they march forward and don't retreat backwards. Meaning that Russian barrier troops will be an absolute necessity in this case. Because if the Russian army does this to their own, then they'll definitely use these tactics on North Koreans as well. Now that's the first delay. As for the second delay, which is likely to be the Kremlin, who is closely watching international reactions to the use of DPRK soldiers, assessing if it could be a sustainable manpower solution. Although, given the recent international backlash on this front, the Kremlin may now attempt to reframe the Kim dynasty soldiers as private volunteer contractors to manage the narrative, but then we'll just have to pull out the old Russian lies flowchart again. Then, taking a brief look into the Donbass, we'll start out in the Pokrovsk direction, where Russian forces were copping quite a beating, as we saw Ukraine's 5th Separate Assault Brigade eliminate new enemy infantry assaults in this direction, with this such example actually happening a fair distance away from the contact point lines, as drawn here on the map. Also in this direction, more Russian hardware was spotted destroyed, personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles. But even more activity than that, because Ukrainian troops supported by Bradley M2 infantry fighting vehicles pressed forward on this front as the 425th Separate Assault Battalion's infantry stormed Russian positions with the, as said, Bradley support, reporting a successful assault with no losses among their ranks. Effectively, they were storming and disrupting Russian trench positions. Then also on the map, in Luhansk, we saw the Russian perspective of a strike on their own ground or basement position. But then, seeing these types of engagements from the opposite vantage point, as a Ukrainian FPV drone strikes deep into a Russian dugout. Then also, expected to be somewhere in the northeast, a no-analog Russian T-90M was destroyed by an FPV drone, though this one appears to have gotten itself stuck in a ditch. And perhaps ironically so, as the ditch may have been from a previous Russian artillery shell, the impact from it, leading to another abandonment of Russia's best-in-class tank. Then also in the east, we saw the effective destruction of a towed Russian howitzer, the D-30, along with a truck that was filled with ammunition, and voila, incroyable. Then on the map, and to a quick catch-up on Chasiv Yar, as the Russian advance to the south of the town has not received any further updates, or better to say, has not gained any further traction from where it stood about 10 to 15 days ago. And it's just the situation that supporting an offensive from beyond the canal is a very costly endeavor to achieve in any sort of tactical sense. Meaning that Russian command would need to be very accepting of huge vehicle and manpower losses if they were to go all in on this front. Then headed across to some news for today, so Norway has committed over $118 million to equip F-16 fighter jets with the necessary arms for Ukraine, with the Norwegian Defense Minister confirming the first delivery of the jets themselves by year's end, where it's expected that Ukraine will receive 6 Norwegian-supplied F-16s in that time frame. Then to some more news for something that will start to become more important as the weeks and months go by, as Lithuania has delivered a new aid package to Ukraine, packed with winter-ready equipment, including generators, ammunition, and mortar shells. So the backup generators will come in handy this winter time, but as for a bit of a geopolitical contrast here, nobody is lining up to provide Russia with backup generators for this coming winter. Something that they would realistically have quite the need for more than previous winters. Then in some more hardware news updates, the United States is set to donate 2,000 Humvees to the armed forces of Ukraine. This contribution is expected to help offset part of the 60,000 Humvees currently being phased out by the US military. Ukraine had previously received 3,000 Humvees during the early stages of the war, a resource they found invaluable on the battlefield. Then to some more Ukrainian hardware news, with this example being something I think we can all envisage for the future of warfare: drone swarms. As Ukraine is actively testing the technology of using swarms of drones and guided munitions powered by advanced AI that are designed to seek and destroy. These upcoming autonomous weapons make split-second targeting decisions, adapting in real time against their adversary in the field. For those watching, it's a prototype, an introduction. For those on the receiving end, however, it's a new era of war. Then headed across to some Russian economy news, as the Russian government bond index is dropping again, almost to historic lows. And just a few points off at this stage. This decline suggests Russia might face challenges borrowing from investors, as bonds are essentially loans from investors to a government where the investor provides money upfront and is paid back later with interest, offering a steady return. However, for Russia, a sharp decline in the bond value suggests it may face significant challenges borrowing, as these low bond prices signal higher risks for investors. This makes it more costly and difficult for Russia to raise funds, resulting in increased borrowing expenses or limited financial resources. So it's like a low confidence vote for their economy. And there's only a handful of ways this can go. For example, new Russian tax reforms, milking their already economically starved citizens. Then, after that, onto austerity measures. But that would be way too unpopular, even for ultra-nationalist Russians. Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So Russia is trying to fine Google over $20 decillion, a 33-digit sum, and a fine amount that dwarfs the entire wealth and assets of Earth. And this came from the Russian courts. So the reason? Well, Russia is upset that Google is blocking Russian-approved media on its search and video platforms. But do we need to point out the irony in the mindset here? Russia has blocked almost the entire suite of Google products in its own country, and has blocked pretty much any Western social media platform you can think of. Which means the Kremlin's upset for one reason only. They've been blocked from regurgitating their own state media propaganda for an international audience. Way to play it cool, Russia. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe, and stick it to the Russian-sponsored trolls in the comments section below, using their Russian authority-approved VPNs to sow their seeds of confusion, and for anything else the troll farm command instructs them to do. So thanks again, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!